All right, my friends, the next panel that we have for you is about sustainable Bitcoin mining, an incredibly relevant topic. We have Gary Krause of Bitcoin Veterans, Beau Turner, CEO of Abundant Mines, Bob Burnett, CEO of Barefoot Mining, Darcy Daubaras, CFO of Hive, and Elliot David, Sustainable Bitcoin Protocol. Please put your hands together for sustainable Bitcoin mining.
Thank you so much for having us here at the Kennedy Center, and thank you to GW for putting together this great event. Very much looking forward to the conversation today, and I hope you do as well. I know we're the last session before lunch, so hope y'all will still remain interested. Today we're going to be talking about sustainable Bitcoin mining. I think maybe first it would be helpful to set the stage, kind of understand like what is sustainability in the context of Bitcoin mining. And as an anecdote, I was in New York City last week for the UN General Assembly for Climate Week. This is the number one most important question that everybody's talking about is what is sustainability? What's the point? Is it like a cost? Is it something that we really need to pay attention to? And I think it's also very apt that we're in DC, heart of our nation's capital. And this past weekend, I was at the National Archives looking at the Constitution, great exhibit if folks are interested. And I think to set the stage for this conversation, one thing that came to mind was how the founders had to ensure that the needs of the present didn't compromise, the livelihoods or the flourishing of Americans in the future. I think it's very apt for this conversation today, and I'd love to sort of have everybody go around and introduce themselves, their company, who they're representing, and how they approach sustainability in Bitcoin mining. Darcy, we can start with you.
Sure. Darcy Daubaras, CFO of Hive Digital, first publicly traded cryptocurrency company back in 2017. We've been green energy since day one, 100% hydroelectric or geothermal. So it's been part of our ethos since day one. We found it to be very important to use renewable energy, do what we can for the environment, and it's something that we've done through Sweden, into Canada, and our most recent exploration into Paraguay, where we're tapping into the largest hydroelectric dam in the Western Hemisphere. So we've always had it as part of what we do. We think that it differentiates ourselves from others, and it's something that we continue to hope to do moving forward as we grow.
Thank you, Darcy. And Bob, as a private miner with a very diversified portfolio, love your thoughts.
Yeah, so interesting, we started the same year as Hive in 2017. We have a mix of on-grid and off-grid operations, although honestly we're focused very much on off-grid now. In fact, we call it wild mining. And part of the reason we do that is that we want to control the power ourselves. So we've done what I think a lot of companies are trending toward, which is to control the power source. And what we found from sustainable sources, frankly, is a huge economic incentive to use them. So we have our own hydroelectric site where we rehabilitated a dam. We have another site in Indiana where we run off of anaerobic digestion from manure from a dairy farm. And we're doing a lot with natural gas, mitigating flaring and using natural gas that would probably otherwise be wasted or in the air. But frankly, while we're happy to support the green initiatives, what we found is we can do it cheaper than we can buy energy on the grid, and we maintain control. So when I say wild mining, what I'm saying is we're not beholden to any third party to provide the power to us, and we take a lot from that. But we also take a lot of responsibility as essentially a power producer, and we certainly work well with the local environmental protection agencies and organizations to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
Great. We'll definitely be coming back to that, but Beau, would love your from Abundant Minds, how do you guys view sustainability? And please introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Beau Turner, the CEO of Abundant Minds. We're a Bitcoin miner hosting company for investors who want to get into Bitcoin mining but don't want to manage those operations themselves. We're based in Oregon. We have 6 sites, and as most people probably are aware, the Northwest has a huge hydropower network, so we're very sustainable in terms of our energy sources. But more so than just the energy aspect of sustainability, I think that's the first thing that people think of when they think of Bitcoin mining and sustainability is where you're getting your energy. But sustainability has as much to do with how we're impacting local economics, how we're impacting people socially, what we're doing to build communities as it does with our energy use. So wherever we can, we're looking to place resources that have the most impact possible with the least capital and essentially take your resources as far as they can go and have the most holistic impact. So that's how I think sustainability is approached by us.
That's great. And Gary, how about yourself?
Gary with Bitcoin Veterans. We are a veteran education and outreach initiative, military veterans. Not all of us were veterans of Bitcoin necessarily, but we are Bitcoin veterans educating the warrior class on Bitcoin. And the perspective I bring is I'm a free and open source software developer, so I contribute a lot in the mining space, keep a lot of tabs on sort of the new innovative technologies coming out in mining. And the thing that excites me the most is hash rate heating as a sustainability model, right? So more of what Beau's focus is on the community and the business models of, hey, how do we create a robust mining ecosystem and economy that can scale and last? And the security budget always comes up with mining. Miners, if they don't get paid, they're going to shut down. So how do we reduce that economically viable scale of mining to create sustainable business models for mining? And I believe that there's a lot of free and open source technology that has come to fruition in the recent time that's going to enable that. You can look at something called the heat punk movement out of Denver, that they're using hash rate to heat homes. I'm personally going to be finishing my basement this winter, and they did a thermodynamic audit from a company called Exergy to see how it makes sense for me to have radiant heating in my home powered by a Bitcoin miner. And we're not talking about a little BitAxe, which is one of my favorite toys in the Bitcoin free and open source space, but we're talking about full-fledged, several hundred terahash worth of mining and 5,000 watts of power heating my home. And I see that as the most sustainable path forward is hash rate in every home and every building that requires heating, which if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it's pretty common.
Thanks for that, Gary. So we obviously have a kind of wide range of scale and approaches to Bitcoin mining, and also a lot of different views on sustainability, whether it's environmental or social. For those in the audience that are maybe less familiar with Bitcoin mining, or maybe they've heard from news media or other sources, what are some of the misconceptions that you often see in Bitcoin mining? And also like you to sort of offer thoughts, if you could whisper in the ear of policymakers, community leaders, what would you recommend to them? How can they, promote sustainability in Bitcoin mining across these different dimensions? Leave it to anybody that wants to jump in. But it looks like, Bob, it looked like you had some thoughts.
Well, I'll start with, what is mining? Because this may be controversial, but I think there's a difference between mining and hashing. And a lot of what we're talking about here is hashing. Mining is really a bigger process that involves running a node, creating block templates, receiving Coinbase transactions. In fact, one of the things I've said is, I named my company in 2017, Barefoot Mining, and realized a few years later that I actually wasn't a miner because I was abdicating a large percentage of the mining responsibility to the pools. And so one of the things we're doing, I know it's a little off topic, but it's certainly something very in the Bitcoin community's, what would you say, the common thoughts in the hallways is about core versus knots. And I'll just say one thing about it, and that's that we run datum servers, we mine our own blocks, and we're very proud of that. And I'm hoping that a larger part of the community starts to do that so we can better decentralize the mining community.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that as well, that's where I see the technology really coming to fruition. You have Technology Ocean has developed this datum protocol. You have the Stratum V2 project, which I myself personally work on, that's doing a very similar thing, but it's enabling as many people as possible that, you got your node runners down, right? Running a node is a very, very common thread throughout Bitcoin. If you're a Bitcoiner not running your node, I implore you to do so. But the next step, to Bob's point, is becoming a miner is how you enforce your view of the Bitcoin protocol. And as long as that work, this proof of work mechanism is there and it's derived from this mining process, you're able to exercise the will of your node on the rest of the network via this mining protocol. And I see solutions like Datum and Stratum V2 and a lot of other innovative techniques reducing the viability, or lowering the entry point to being a miner instead of just a hash rate provider. Right? There's a lot of self-hosting technology out there. Start9 is a very common one. That's how I've run a data gateway myself. But bringing more of that technology where it's, when Wi-Fi first came out, right? It was like, well, hey, grandma's never gonna run Wi-Fi. Well, no, everybody's got Wi-Fi in their house now because it's been commoditized, right? The software, the hardware that was needed to realize this broad coverage of Wi-Fi came about because people took the initiative to make it even easier for any individual to plug in that Wi-Fi router and get hashing. And I see a lot of innovation and things on the horizon with mining that are going to enable more people to do that themselves and become a sovereign Bitcoiner.
Yeah.
Interesting. We'll definitely want to return to kind of the sovereignty conversation, the social aspect of this. But Darcy, I'd love to turn to you. Hive is a large publicly traded Bitcoin miner, and I think one of the common misconceptions I see from people that I talk to is that Bitcoin miners are these energy-hungry beasts. They raise prices, they have to run all the time. So how does Hive think about the way it interacts with the energy system? What might people want to better understand about how mining works in that sense?
Yeah, no, it's a very good misconception, or bad misconception, but it's out there, that Bitcoin hashers come into communities and are going to cause blackouts, going to cause brownouts, and suck all the energy out of the community. It's the complete opposite. We come into situations where there's excess electricity, and we use that excess electricity, pay the utility providers so that they can build a better network. For us as Hive, in all the communities we're in, we have the ability to shut down very quickly. One of our flagships before we got Paraguay up and running is a 30 megawatt facility up in northern Sweden, about 100 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. We can shut down our facility from 30 megawatts to 5 megawatts in 5 seconds. All the community needs to do, the energy provider, is to send a signal to us, and we do that. It helps to balance the grid. It helps to use that excess electricity, and it's part of building with the community. These are excess electrons, they're not being used, that they're not getting paid for. So for us to be able to come in, use that, help the local community, it values them greatly. They're glad to have us there because it's revenues that they otherwise wouldn't have. And touching on the community part, when we go in there, we want to be part of the community. I've got a background working for hardcore mining in Argentina and Chile. And when you go into those communities, you don't want to be taking all their resources. You want to be part of the community. So when we go in, we use the excess heat in Montreal to heat a warehouse that makes whirlpools and hot tubs next door. So it's using that excess heat. Up in Sweden, we help to promote the local hockey team. We sponsor the arena. Down in Paraguay, same thing. We're lighting streets that were never lit before. We're putting air conditioning in the schools. So it's being part of the community. You don't want to be a foreign entity coming in and being seen as the bad person coming in and taking away all the resources. So Bitcoin mining coming into the community isn't a bad thing. It helps balancing the grid. It's something that I think that can help the communities within the United States, is finding better ways to to work with those energy providers, get rid of a lot of the red tape so that miners can come into areas. And I think, talking about whispering into the ears of politicians is finding ways to bring a lot more of that bringing ASIC mining production into the United States so that we're not having to bring them in from Malaysia, China, or offshore. If the United States wants to be the Bitcoin mining capital of the world, you've got to have it all within your own borders.
I mean, I totally, yeah. No, I completely agree, and I think for anybody in the audience that is familiar with the energy system, hearing that was my kind of orange pill moment, where the ability to be that flexible, if you work in the energy space, that's like, before you even hear anything about Bitcoin, before you hear the B word, that flexibility is so powerful. So, thank you for sharing that.
If I could, I really like what you said, Darcy, and what I think is an interesting observation is, would you say Sweden?
Sweden, yep.
So I think what you're going to find as mining goes forward, whether it's inside the US or outside, is that a lot of it's going to occur in very small communities, or maybe even in places where it doesn't exist. We're doing some of that. You're also going to see, just to highlight something he said, he talked about a warehouse and heating and like.
I was going to turn over to Gary, who I know is our resident heat hashing aficionado, but please.
Well, I'll just finish the thought. Is one thing we do is we have a relationship within a greenhouse, a commercial flower grower, and we have an operation set up around the perimeter of his greenhouse, and when he needs heat or humidity reduction, we blow in, and Darcy's doing it at maybe a large warehouse scale, and Gary's got these things going in the home. So mining's occurring kind of in these places and doing things in a very positive way that I think the general public, certainly probably the folks in Washington, don't understand.
Right, there's these byproducts of Bitcoin mining, right? You're running a computer, you might have your computer sitting on your lap, gets super hot, but Bitcoin miners are actually finding productive uses of this heat. I forget the percentage, something like 90-something% of the electricity that flows through a Bitcoin miner gets converted to heat. But Gary, would love your thoughts on this as somebody who's a practitioner.
Heat is a product, it is not a problem. And when you begin to frame Bitcoin mining through that lens where heat is the primary product, where if you need low-grade heat, right, and that goes into a variety, if you can think of a process that takes low-grade heat, there's an avenue where you can burn electricity through these Bitcoin miners and get that low-grade heat. And so that really, if you shift the perspective, if you're not trying to get ROI on the Bitcoin, right, but you do have a need to generate and produce energy to get that low-grade heat, why would you not want to be rebated in some way, shape, or form in the hardest money known to man? And so that really is like that kind of paradigm shifting. I think we've seen a lot of large mining operations or hashing operations that were focused solely on driving that ROI. And the technology that's coming about now is you don't need hash rate as the primary source. Heat is the primary product that you're producing. It just so happens that you get to collect some sats every time you run your dryer.
That's awesome. And Beau, I think this concept of like circularity and making the most productive uses of resources, it's very, it's part of this ethos of Bitcoin mining. It's like, how do you turn a waste into something of value, whether it be utilizing methane, which I think we'll talk about in a second, or utilizing heat, or utilizing waste electrons, as Darcy pointed out. But Beau, would love your thoughts. Like, how does Bitcoin mining inspire this different way of thinking about sustainability?
Well, when you think about sustainability, I mean, to me, one of the most powerful things that we can do for sustainability is waste removal from any system. And as Gary was talking about, using our heat, it's not a waste product, it's a resource. I mean, half of all the energy that we generate in the world goes to some sort of heating use, and half of that half is for low-grade heat, which is what miners produce. So you can think of any heater that's not also mining or hashing is actually waste. It's waste because it's not being double spent. And one of the most common misconceptions, I think, on that waste point is most people think of energy as this finite resource that we've got to stop using as much of in order to have more. But the reality is such a huge portion of all the energy that we generate in the world goes to waste, and people like Darcy, people like us, people like Bob, seek it out. You know, mining is this hunter for wasted resources that goes and puts them to use, making the entire system more thermodynamically sound. I mean, if you think of the world's energy system, if you can put any wasted energy to use for mining, you're effectively an energy conservationist because you're turning that energy into a more permanent form into Bitcoin, and that's going to last far longer than, you know, a fleeting electron that gets exhausted into the atmosphere. We don't create or destroy energy, we're just changing it through different forms at all times. And so if we can change it into a form that then can be repurposed as economic energy in the future, we've done something profound for the sustainability, not just of individual energy sources, but of the energy that we generate as a civilization.
I love that reframing, and I'll actually give a little shout out. There's this interesting analogy between Bitcoin mining and traditional data centers. You know, folks in the audience have probably heard of AI and high performance computing, and these are data centers that typically do need to run all the time. They can't really, for the most part, engage in that flexibility that Darcy was talking about. They can't really go in these remote areas as much, as well as some of these other Bitcoin mining technologies that we've been talking about. Troy Krause and Margot Paez, they liken this to a dung beetle versus a locust, where a locust is kind of, it's like a swarm, it takes as much as it can. Bitcoin mining is a little bit like a dung beetle, right? They find out the waste products, the waste electrons, convert that into value or into energy that lasts, so to speak. And on that topic, Bob, I'd love to turn to you. Some of your sites are operating under or are consuming another type of waste product, methane, which is a super pollutant. It's responsible for about a quarter of all global warming, and yet receives something like 3% of all climate investment dollars. How is Barefoot mining approaching the methane problem, and what are you doing to reduce those emissions?
Well, if you listen to Bill Gates, it's all about the cows, which I don't actually believe, but to the degree it's true, like I said, in Indiana, what we're doing is we've developed a partnership where this particular dairy farm had a problem, which was thousands and thousands of cows producing excrement every day, and we were able to work in partnership with them to take this problem and turn it into something very productive. So we're processing the methane in a great way that removes it, and we're obviously creating a stronger Bitcoin network, and we're turning it into Bitcoin. In other places, we have operations, especially in Western Pennsylvania, where we work sometimes in cooperation with oil producers who would otherwise have to flare gas. And I should point out, like in all those operations, we use they're called Class 5 EPA certified engines. So while there is some emission, it's almost zero.
Yeah, compared to the traditional flare stack, which for those in the audience, you ever see those like chimneys with the flame on top, a little candle? They typically are burning off those methane stacks, 90% efficiency at best.
Yeah, probably in a good day.
On a good day?
On a good day.
But you guys are like 99+%.
I don't know the exact number, but it's effectively zero. We could run one of those engines in this room for the rest of the day, and everybody would be just fine. We also do things where there are wells that are capped that often are abandoned, and we can go into those wells, properly treat them, extract the gas again in the same sort of manner, and then also make sure that we can plug them properly on the backside so that they don't create a long-term problem. So the moral of the story is methane is a very valuable resource, but it has to be handled properly. And I think Beau made this point. We are incented to find these nooks and crannies, and we're all evidence of companies do that. And I think we're at a point too where I'll try to say this briefly. Right now, there's about 30,000 terawatt hours of electricity produced on grid in the world every year. And we're using about 200 terawatts, so about 0.6% of the world's electricity is used by us. I have a metric, there's about 1,500 of the 30,000 that is available at less than 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So I call that the mining zone. And it's hard to find energy in that space. So I think that's why we end up in Sweden and we end up in a field in western Pennsylvania, because that's the only way really to find those nooks and crannies, but they'd otherwise be wasted.
And you certainly don't want to compete for electricity with, the traditional data centers or even with people,
Right.
Everybody else is going to be willing to pay a lot more for electricity.
And that's a big change too. Like when Darcy and I started in 2017, I don't think, maybe say it too, we didn't have a lot of competition. We could go to a lot of different places.
Plus 10 cents,
Yeah.
rates, and you guys were fine. But I'm sorry, Beau, did you
Just
wanna...
to double click on what you're talking about, I don't think many people appreciate how profound it is that there's a profitable way to mitigate a waste and pollution product, whether it's a landfill or a flare. I mean, how many people have heard of a profitable way to make use of trash? Before Bitcoin mining, I don't know of a way that you could actually make economic sense. I mean, if you think of cleanup of Superfund sites, they're called Superfund sites for a reason. It takes a super amount of funds to clean up these environmental issues. You've actually got a profitable way to go into things that otherwise would do immense harm to the atmosphere, and it make economic sense on its own. You don't have to ask for a subsidy, you don't have to ask for outside funding. You're actually making profitable use of a resource that you're helping to clean up the environment with. And before mining, I can't think of a single incentive structure or system that did that in any meaningful way. And it's probably going to be the way that we go carbon negative as a network. And nobody had to subsidize that. That's just inbuilt in its design.
Sometimes I wonder if, Satoshi couldn't have predicted the impact that Bitcoin mining would have on the energy system. Or maybe they did. We have no idea. But I often wonder, was that notion of sustainability we talked about in the beginning, right? Ensuring the needs of the present don't compromise the needs of the future. I wonder if that was a part of the thinking as well from an energy perspective. But in our remaining minutes, I'd love, we have a couple of experts on the stage. The last 4 or 5 years in Bitcoin mining has seen several, large industry shifts. We had the China mining ban. We had this massive migration of hash rate into the US. We've had, Bitcoin ETFs and treasury companies. I'd be curious to hear from the experts on stage, what do you think the next few years are going to look like? What emerging trends do you see? And we can start with you, Gary.
Yeah, so I talked about the technology of this, and I really see this flywheel starting to spin more rapidly. We talked about nooks and crannies and different energy forms and bootstrapping, not just sustainable projects, but just infrastructure in general. And what that needs, if nobody's ever seen a Bitcoin miner, it's this ugly silver shoebox. At least that's the most common form. But to fit in these different nooks and crannies and provide this flexible demand to the grid to help stabilize it, we're going to need a lot more creative solutions. We're going to need a lot more novel form factors. And this is where projects from the 256 Foundation, where they're doing open source hardware for Bitcoin mining, I think those are going to spark the innovation that will enable us to fit Bitcoin mining to every single nook and cranny of this planet to stabilize the grid, bootstrap infrastructure, and keep this energy system that we have, that we live such a life of luxury with, keep it going for a long time while simultaneously uplifting humanity by securing the Bitcoin network.
Soon my TV, will also be a Bitcoin miner.
Your TV will be a Bitcoin miner, your toaster.
Toaster oven, electric toothbrush.
Yeah.
Suddenly I can stop brushing my teeth.
If there are spare electrons out there, you should do a SHA-256 hash twice to see if you win a block. Because if you're not doing it otherwise, it's just going to waste, as Beau alluded to earlier.
Yeah, and Beau, what trends are you seeing?
My journey into mining was kind of a roundabout. I originally thought I was going to be a sustainability engineer. That was kind of my path in life before I had any idea what mining was or that I would go so deep into Bitcoin. And through this roundabout process, I think we've found the most powerful sustainability engineering tool that on a holistic level, whether you're talking about communities, whether you're talking about heating greenhouses, whether you're talking about making use of waste energy, we've got this profound Swiss Army knife of sustainability that for years was looked at as just, you know, absolute trash in the minds of sustainability experts. And we're entering the phase of this network where we are of the scale and of the maturity where we can have a profound sustainability impact on all kinds of systems. And I think that story is just starting to be told.
Bob?
Well, I think I'll take this moment just to encourage everybody to become a miner. That we need to reverse the centralization forces. We have too much concentration of hash rate in very large companies. We have too much concentration of hash rate in large pools. And the tools are now available. Gary mentioned this. Pick knots, pick core. I'm a knots guy, by the way, but pick one, run a node, learn about datum, or learn about SV2. Again, I don't care. Get yourself a miner. If it's a BitX, fine. If it's a S19 or S21, fine. I don't care. Don't do it for economic reasons, though. Do it because you're a citizen of Bitcoin, you want to protect the network, and you want to learn. And I don't think you become truly knowledgeable about what Bitcoin is and how Bitcoin works until you mine. And I mean that in the literal sense, not hash, but mine. So, you know, please do your part and become a miner.
Thanks, Bob. Darcy?
What was the question again?
I would say, like, what are the
Sorry.
trends you're seeing? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of miners are also becoming
Yeah.
mullet miners, Bitcoin mining, and HPC. You know, what do you see as
I think over the next couple years, going into 2027, a lot of the large miners, as we've seen, are moving away from Bitcoin mining and moving into AI. I don't think that that's the best thing. I think you're going to see hybrids. I think you're going to have large companies that are doing both. We'll have a facility that is doing some high-performance computing, which has to stay running all the time. But to help the community, you've also got the Bitcoin mining. So you can shut down, help balance the load. I think that there's a lot of symbiotic relationship there that works versus just having an AI system there. We're here to be sustainable. I think there's going to be a lot more looking for those needles in the haystack because the stranded energy is out there. There's a lot of people talking about solar, talking about wind. Why don't we look for the resources that are already out there, that are being unused, versus spending all this money on trying to create new energy? The energy's out there. We just got to find a way to harness it. And it's hard. We just got to find it.
Well, thank you. And with that, I'd love to thank our panelists for joining us and for sharing their insights. And we hope you all enjoyed this conference.
All right, my friends, thank you so much for joining us. Please give another round of applause for our panel.